In the endless silence of space, a single human walked among beings from 100 worlds. His name was Captain Aaron Valen, a soldier from Earth, a small war-torn world that the galaxy once thought too violent, too emotional, too fragile to survive beyond its own skies. Yet somehow humans had reached the stars, and they had done what they always did. They endured. Aaron served aboard the Sarathi flagship Silver Dawn, a massive warship of silver scales and living metal. Its commander, Lyra, was a proud warrior from the Sarathi Empire, tall, strong, and wrapped in elegant armor that shimmered like moonlight. Her people were known for their discipline, their honor, and their cold logic. Humans, on the other hand, were wild. To the Sarathi, humans were unpredictable, stubborn, and strange. But when battles came, when death filled the air, it was always the human who refused to back down. Aaron was not like other soldiers. He didn't fight for orders or pride or reward. He fought for people. For every frightened child hiding under rubble, for every colony struggling to breathe beneath the smoke of war. And that was what made him dangerous. Not his weapons, not his muscles, but his heart. Lyra had seen it many times. When her soldiers hesitated to advance under enemy fire, Aaron would already be there, his plasma rifle in hand, his armor cracked, his voice shouting through the comms, "We hold the line." He wasn't just a fighter. He was a light. And even the Sarathi, cold and proud, began to follow that light. At first, Lyra had dismissed him as reckless. But after every battle, she found herself watching him from afar. How he spoke gently to wounded soldiers, how he cleaned his weapon with care, how his eyes always searched for something beyond victory, something human. Against her will, admiration began to grow in her heart. There was one mission that changed everything. A small refugee colony was caught between Sarathi lines and an enemy ambush. The council ordered a retreat. Too dangerous, they said. Too few survivors. But Aaron disobeyed. He took a shuttle alone and flew straight into the fire. Hours passed. The fleet thought he was dead. Then out of the burning clouds his shuttle returned, blackened and half destroyed, but full of alien children, crying and alive. He stepped out with a bleeding arm and simply said, "Couldn't leave them." To the Sarathi, that act was foolish. To Lyra, it was unforgettable. She had stood there in silence as the council argued about his disobedience. But inside, her chest ached in ways she didn't understand. Days turned to weeks, and their bond grew. They trained together, planned together, and sometimes, when the stars were quiet, talked. Aaron told her about Earth, about oceans and rain and how it smelled after a storm. Lyra listened, pretending not to care, but her eyes always softened. Yet deep down, fear grew inside her. The Sarathi did not mix emotion with duty, and she could not afford to appear weak in front of her soldiers. She was a commander, and he was a soldier from a world that burned. The others already whispered that the alien commander had fallen under the spell of a human. Still, whenever she looked at him, she felt something she couldn't explain. Warmth, hope, humanity. But hope, as the humans say, is fragile, and one day when the council called them both to answer for Aaron's defiance, Lyra made a choice that would break his heart and hers. For now, though, Aaron didn't know what was coming. He was in the training deck, wiping the grease from his hands, smiling that quiet smile he always wore. Around him, the young Sarathi recruits watched in awe, whispering about the Death Worlder who never gave up. In the corner of the observation deck, Lyra stood watching him, her claws pressed tight against the glass. Her eyes shimmered with conflict. She knew the next words she would say to him, and how much they would hurt. But duty, she told herself, must come before everything, even before the heart. The day began like any other aboard the Silver Dawn. The great warship floated above a crimson planet, its engines humming softly. Inside the command chamber, officers spoke in calm voices, screens flickered, and decisions of life and death were made every minute. But beneath all that control, tension ran like a silent current, especially between Commander Lyra and Captain Aaron Valen. The human stood beside her, his dark armor scratched and dented, his face weary from too many sleepless nights. He had just returned from another mission, one that wasn't approved. He had gone down to the planet's surface to save a group of miners trapped under enemy fire. The council had ordered a withdrawal, but Aaron couldn't leave them behind. He brought them back alive. The Sarathi Council didn't see a hero. They saw a disobedient soldier, a liability. Now in front of the high holographic table, the counselors' faces appeared, tall, scaled figures with cold eyes and sharper tongues. Their voices echoed through the chamber. "You disobeyed a direct order, human," hissed one. "You endangered the mission and the lives of our soldiers for a few worthless miners." Aaron's jaw tightened, but he stayed calm. "They weren't worthless," he said simply. "They were people." Lyra stood beside him, silent. Her heart pounded painfully in her chest. She wanted to defend him. She wanted to tell them that without Aaron's courage, hundreds would be dead, but her mouth refused to move. She was a commander of the Sarathi Empire. If she sided with a human against her own council, she would lose everything: her honor, her command, her future. So she stayed quiet. The council turned their sharp eyes on her. "Commander Lyra, do you stand by this human's reckless act?" The room went still. Aaron looked at her, waiting.
He trusted her.
He believed in her, and that was what made it hurt more. She drew in a slow breath, her voice steady but cold. "The captain acted without orders," she said. "He put the mission at risk." "The council's judgment is fair." Aaron blinked once. It wasn't anger that flashed in his eyes, it was disbelief. For a moment he thought he had heard her wrong, but when he saw the hardness on her face, something inside him cracked. After the meeting ended, silence filled the chamber. The counselors disappeared one by one, leaving only the two of them standing in the flickering blue light. Aaron finally spoke, his voice quiet. "You agreed with them?" Lyra turned away, her claws curling against her palms. "I agreed with logic. You broke orders, Aaron. You endangered our forces." He took a step closer. "I saved lives. You always say that." She snapped, her voice suddenly sharp. "But you never think about the consequences. You humans, you think you're special. You think emotion can win wars. But it only makes you weak." Her words cut through him like a blade. For a second, he just stood there, staring at her. The same woman who had once laughed at his human jokes, who had trusted him in battle, now looked at him like he was a mistake. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He only nodded slowly, the light in his eyes fading. "Weak," he repeated softly. "Maybe you're right." Lyra's chest tightened. She hadn't meant to say it that way. She wanted to take it back, to explain that she was scared. Scared of losing him, scared of breaking her duty. But her pride held her still. She didn't move. She didn't speak. Aaron reached up and touched the side of his cracked armor. His hand trembled slightly. Then, without a word, he began unclasping the plates, one by one. The sound of metal falling to the floor echoed in the chamber. Clang, the chest plate. Clang, the gauntlets. Clang, the shoulder guards. When he was done, he stood there in his undersuit, no longer a soldier, just a man. He looked at her one last time, his eyes calm, tired, and full of something she couldn't name. "You know, Lyra," he said softly, "I thought we were more than this." Then he turned and walked away. The door slid shut behind him, leaving Lyra standing in silence. The armor lay scattered across the floor, reflecting the cold blue light, pieces of a man's faith, left behind, and for the first time in many years, Commander Lyra felt something she had never felt in battle, the sharp, twisting ache of regret. The corridors of the Silver Dawn were quiet that night, the kind of quiet that didn't bring peace and only emptiness. Commander Lyra walked through the long metallic halls, her reflection following her in the dark windows that showed the stars beyond. The galaxy was endless, beautiful, and cold, just like she felt inside. She had not seen Captain Aaron Valen since that moment in the command chamber. His armor still lay where he had dropped it, untouched. The maintenance crews had asked if they should clean it up, but Lyra had refused. "Leave it," she had said. She didn't know why. Maybe part of her wanted to see it there, a reminder of the man who once stood beside her. Her mind kept replaying what she had said to him. "You humans think you're special. Emotion makes you weak." She closed her eyes, her chest tightening. Why had she said it? Why had she let her pride speak louder than her heart? Aaron had never asked for praise. He never wanted power or glory. He just wanted to save people. He believed every life mattered, even when the council called them insignificant. Lyra entered the training deck where Aaron used to train the younger soldiers. The lights were dim now. The air still carried the faint smell of oil, metal, and the strange human soap he used. In the corner, she saw something. A small piece of paper taped to the wall. Humans called it a photo. It was a picture of Earth. Blue oceans, green forests, clouds swirling in a white mist. Underneath it, Aaron had written in bold letters, "Home is worth fighting for." Lyra reached out and touched the image. It was smooth, fragile. Her vision blurred slightly. She had never understood humans. Their softness, their laughter, their constant need to care. But now she understood something else. Their strength didn't come from logic. It came from love, and she had broken the heart of one of them. Across the ship, Aaron sat alone in his small quarters. Without his armor, he looked different. Not the unshakable warrior everyone whispered about, but a tired man with bruised hands and eyes that carried too many memories. His armor had been his shell, his protection from both bullets and emotions. Without it, everything hurt more, not especially her words. He replayed them in his mind again and again. "You humans think you're special." He gave a small, sad laugh. Maybe she was right. Maybe humans were too emotional for this galaxy. Maybe they didn't belong among stars filled with creatures who only understood power and order. But deep down, he didn't regret what he had done. He couldn't. Saving those miners, risking his life, that was what being human meant. It was the one thing he couldn't give up, even if it made him an outcast. Still, it hurt that she didn't see it. Lyra, the one person he thought understood. The next morning, the Silver Dawn moved through space on silent engines. The crew whispered that the human captain had resigned. Some said he requested transfer back to the Terran fleet. Others said he planned to leave military service altogether. No one knew for sure. Lyra received a message. It was short, written in simple words. "Commander, thank you for everything. You taught me what discipline means. I hope one day you see what humanity really fights for. Aaron Valen." She read it again and again until her hands trembled. No emotion showed on her face, but her heart burned. Later, she went to his quarters. The door opened with a soft hiss. Inside, everything was neat, as if he had never been there. Only one thing remained, his helmet. A small, cracked symbol of Earth was etched on its side, a blue circle with white stars. Lyra picked it up, her claws brushing the cool metal. Her reflection looked back at her from its dark visor, and for the first time in her life she felt small. That night she stood at the viewport staring into the stars. The Silver Dawn was surrounded by the cold beauty of the void, but she couldn't admire it. All she could see was the emptiness beside her. She had power, rank, and command, yet she had lost something far greater. She had lost the only being who made her believe that kindness was not weakness, and that even in the coldness of space, warmth could still exist. Lyra whispered softly, almost like a prayer. "Aaron, wherever you are. I was wrong, but no one heard her. Only the stars did, and they stayed silent. Days turned into weeks, yet the silence left behind by Captain Aaron Valen lingered like a wound that refused to heal. The Silver Dawn continued its missions across the warfront, but everything felt different. The ship still hummed with engines and orders still echoed through its halls, but the warmth that once filled it, the strange human warmth, was gone. Commander Lyra carried on with her duties. Her voice was calm, her posture perfect, her orders flawless. But inside something was breaking. She had spent her whole life believing emotion was weakness. The Sarathi were trained to bury feelings, to replace compassion with logic. But now, for the first time, she felt the full weight of emotion. And it was unbearable. Everywhere she went, reminders of Aaron haunted her. The empty training deck where he used to laugh with recruits. The storage bay where he once fixed broken drones while humming a strange earth melody. Even the mess hall felt hollow without his stories about oceans, mountains, and simple earth things she could barely imagine. One evening, Lyra walked into the ship's hangar. Aaron's personal shuttle was still there, small, scarred, and patched up in human fashion with uneven welds. The Sarathi engineers had often mocked his ugly human machine, but Lyra looked at it differently now. To her it was a symbol, stubborn, flawed, but full of heart. Just like the man who flew it. She ran her hand along the side of the shuttle. Her claws traced the faint letters painted near the hatch. "No one left behind." That was Aaron's personal code. The same words that had once made her call him reckless. Now those words felt sacred. She remembered the day he returned from the rescue mission. His armor was cracked, his shoulder bleeding, but his eyes were full of relief, because the miners he saved were alive. He had smiled at her then, that simple human smile, and she had said nothing. No praise, no gratitude, only cold silence. The memory stabbed deep. In her private quarters, she sat alone with the lights dimmed. The helmet he left behind rested on her desk. Sometimes she would reach out and touch it, hoping it would somehow bring back the sound of his voice, but it never did. The galaxy was vast, yet it felt painfully small without him. Outside, the war worsened. Without Aron's fearless tactics, missions began to fail. His human instincts and that strange mix of logic and madness had often turned the tide in impossible situations. Now commanders hesitated, soldiers second-guessed, and morale fell. The Sarathi Council didn't admit it, but even they knew something vital was missing. The human's courage had been contagious. He had inspired not by rank or threat, but by heart, and that was something no empire could manufacture. Lyra began reviewing old mission logs, recordings from past battles. She found one where Aron's voice rang through the comms. "We don't fight because we're ordered to. We fight because someone has to protect what's good in this galaxy. If not us, then who?" Hearing it again broke her. She covered her face, tears slipping between her fingers. A sight no Sarathi commander would ever allow. But in that moment, she was not a commander. She was just a soul who had driven away the one person who showed her what compassion meant. Later that night, she received a report. Human forces had been spotted near the border. Among them, a name appeared, Captain Aron Valen, assigned to independent rescue missions. Her heart skipped. He was alive, still fighting, still saving others. She stared at the report for a long time. A mix of relief and sorrow filled her chest. He had moved on, and she had to live with the shadow of her own choices. She looked out the viewport again. The stars stretched endlessly across the void, cold and beautiful. But for the first time, she didn't see distant suns. She saw his eyes, warm, determined, unyielding. Lyra whispered softly, "You were right, Aron. Emotion isn't weakness. It's the reason we keep going." And as the stars shimmered quietly, she made a silent promise. If the galaxy ever gave her another chance, she wouldn't stay silent again. It had been almost 2 months since Captain Aron Valen walked away from the Silver Dawn. The ship had moved across battle lines, through victories and losses, but nothing felt the same. Commander Lyra carried on with the discipline of a perfect soldier, yet every order she gave sounded hollow. Like an echo in an empty room, she had thought time would heal her guilt, that duty would silence the ache. But every time she looked at the empty space beside her command chair, the silence grew louder. Her crew rarely spoke of him, but his name still carried weight. The younger soldiers often said, if the human were here, he'd find a way. Those words stung more than any wound. That evening, as the Silver Dawn drifted through the dark edges of the Orion sector, the alarm lights suddenly flashed red. A communication officer shouted, "Commander! Emergency transmission incoming from the Vega colony." Lyra's eyes snapped to the holoscreen. The image was grainy, filled with static. A terrified colonist's voice came through, shaking and desperate. "We're under attack. Pirates, hundreds of them. The defense grid is failing, and we need help. Please, anyone respond." Lyra's claws tightened against the console. Vega colony. It was the same mining world Aron had once saved against council orders. The same place she had judged him for. Fate had a cruel sense of memory. She stood tall, her voice sharp and commanding. "Prepare jump coordinates. All units ready for combat deployment." But before her officers could move, another voice came through the static. A voice that made every Sarathi on the bridge freeze. "This is Captain Aron Valen, Human Rescue Corps. We've got civilians evacuating, but we're pinned down. Requesting any allied support. If anyone can hear this, and we're holding as long as we can." Lyra's breath caught. For a moment she couldn't speak. Her throat tightened painfully, and her chest felt like it was being crushed from within. The voice was rough, weary, but unmistakably his. "Repeat that transmission," she ordered. The comms officer obeyed, replaying the message. "This is Captain Aron Valen." Lyra's heart trembled. He was alive, still fighting, still saving people, still being the man she once called reckless. Her officers exchanged glances. One of them spoke carefully. "Commander, the enemy fleet is large. They have orbital cannons. If we go in, we risk total loss." She turned toward him, her eyes burning with fierce determination. He risked everything to save us once. I will not abandon him now. No one dared to argue. Within minutes, the Silver Dawn roared to life. Engines flared blue, shields powered up, and the mighty Sarathi ship jumped into hyperspace, straight into the storm. When they emerged above Vega Colony, chaos awaited them. Pirate cruisers rained plasma fire on the surface, explosions lighting up the night below. In the middle of the burning colony, Lyra spotted a smaller human vessel, Aaron's rescue ship. It was damaged, its shields flickering. Lock on his coordinates, she commanded. Deploy fighters. Cover the civilians. As the battle unfolded, Lyra's heart pounded harder than ever. Every explosion felt like it struck her directly. She could hear Aaron's voice over the comms, calm but strained. Civilians are almost clear. Holding the west side. If anyone makes it through, protect the transports. Aaron, this is Lyra, she shouted into the mic. I'm here, we're here, hold on. There was a brief pause. Then his voice came back, surprised, soft, and full of that old warmth. Lyra, you came? She swallowed hard. I should never have let you go. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Then his chuckle came through, even in the middle of chaos. Didn't think you'd miss me this much, Commander. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled. Something rare for her kind. Just stay alive, human. The battle raged on. The Silver Dawn unleashed its full power, covering the evacuation ships and blasting enemy cruisers out of orbit. The Sarathi fought like never before, inspired by the return of the man who had once taught them courage. Through the smoke and fire, Lyra watched Aaron's ship descend into the flames to protect a group of trapped colonists. Her voice cracked as she yelled, Aaron, pull back! You'll be caught in the blast. Not yet, his voice replied, calm and steady. Not while there are people still down here? Static filled the line. Then silence. Lyra's claws dug into the console. Aaron, answer me! She shouted, but only the crackle of flames came through. Her eyes filled with fear and pain, a feeling no commander was ever supposed to show. The bridge crew fell silent, waiting. And in that heavy, trembling quiet, Lyra whispered the truth she should have said long ago. Don't you dare die on me, human. Not again. The moment the signal from Captain Aaron Valen went silent, panic filled the command deck of the Silver Dawn. The screen that had once carried his voice now showed nothing but fire and static. Commander Lyra's claws trembled against the console as she stared at the colony below. A burning wasteland covered in smoke and explosions. Deploy the landing teams, she shouted. I'm going down there myself. Her officers tried to protest. Commander, it's too dangerous. The atmosphere is collapsing. The surface is unstable. Lyra's voice turned sharp as steel. He's down there. I'm not leaving him behind. The ship's bay doors opened with a roar and her shuttle plunged through the flames. Below her, Vega Colony looked like a dying world. Buildings torn apart, the ground cracked with molten rivers. But through the haze, she saw something. A group of human survivors huddled near a destroyed shelter, and one lone figure standing in front of them, Aaron. He was covered in dust and blood, his armor gone, his shirt torn, his skin burned from plasma fire. In his hands he held a glowing plasma blade, its blue light flickering weakly. Around him, enemy soldiers moved closer, outnumbering him 50-1. Yet he stood his ground. Lyra's shuttle hit the ground hard. She stepped out, her eyes wide as she saw the chaos unfold. Aaron was fighting with nothing but willpower, blocking, striking, shielding the wounded behind him. Every move was slower than before, every breath heavier, but he didn't stop. For a moment, time itself seemed to freeze. The proud Sarathi commander, cold, disciplined, untouchable, stared at the human who refused to die. And in that instant, Lyra finally understood the truth. Strength wasn't about perfection. It was about heart. And no one in the galaxy had more heart than him. She grabbed her rifle and ran toward him. Aaron, she shouted. He turned, his face lighting up with disbelief and relief. You again? He said, almost smiling. Didn't think you'd actually come. Shut up and fight, she snapped, though her voice shook. They fought side by side like they had in the old days, her sharp precision matching his wild bravery. Together, they cut through the attackers, each protecting the other without even thinking. She covered his flank. He shielded her from a plasma blast. But then a massive explosion tore through the ground behind them. The force knocked them both down. Lyra hit the dirt, ears ringing. When she looked up, Aaron was dragging himself to his feet, clutching his side, blood staining his hand. "No," she whispered, crawling toward him. He smiled faintly. Still breathing, mostly, she reached him, grabbing his arm, pulling him close. "You idiot," she whispered. "You could have died." His reply came with a tired grin. "You'd miss me." Her heart broke all over again. She held him tighter, her armored claws shaking. Around them, the enemy retreat sirens began to sound. The Silver Dawn had arrived in full force, driving the pirates away. The battle was ending, but the man she had once called reckless now lay bleeding in her arms. "Why did you come here alone?" she asked, her voice trembling. He looked up at her with those calm human eyes. "Because someone had to. You taught me that command means protecting others, even when it hurts." Lyra felt tears sting her eyes. She had taught him discipline, and he had taught her heart. Now he was using both to save others, even if it cost him his life. The medics arrived, shouting orders as they lifted the wounded. But Lyra didn't move. She kept holding him as if afraid he'd vanish if she let go. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Please, Aaron, I can't lose you again." He smiled softly, his voice fading. "You didn't lose me. You just had to find me." And then his hand went limp. For a terrifying second, Lyra couldn't breathe. The world blurred around her. Fire, smoke, shouting. None of it mattered. All she saw was him. The man who had shown her what it meant to be human. She pressed her forehead against his and whispered, "Don't you dare die, human. Not after everything." The medics pulled her away gently, connecting him to life support devices. His heartbeat was faint, but it was there. Weak, yet still fighting. Just like him. As the shuttle lifted off, Lyra looked down at the ruined planet growing smaller beneath them. The war was far from over, but something inside her had changed forever. She turned to the medic. "Keep him alive. That's an order." And in her heart she made a silent vow. If Aaron Valen survived this, she would never let him walk away again. Not from her. Not from anyone. Because this time she understood. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't power or logic. It was love. The medbay of the Silver Dawn was silent except for the rhythmic beeping of life support monitors. Sterile lights glowed softly above, and the faint hum of the ship's engines filled the air like a heartbeat. Commander Lyra sat beside the medical pod, her claws folded tightly together, her golden eyes fixed on the man lying inside. Captain Aaron Valen looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Tubes and wires ran across his chest, and his breath came slow and shallow. His body had been broken, burned, almost shattered, but he was still alive. The doctors said it was a miracle. Lyra knew better. It wasn't luck. It was his will, days past. She barely left his side. The proud Sarathi warrior who once commanded thousands now spent her hours in silence beside a single human soldier. Sometimes she would whisper. Other times she just sat, staring at him, remembering every word she had said to hurt him. "You don't belong in this war. You are reckless." Emotional, weak, her words echoed in her mind like a curse. She had thought she was protecting him from himself. But now she saw the truth. It wasn't him she doubted, and it was herself. One night, as the ship drifted through the quiet of deep space, Lyra finally spoke aloud, her voice low and trembling. "You were right, Aaron," she whispered. "I thought emotions made you fragile. I thought humans were foolish for fighting with their hearts instead of their logic. But now, I see that's what makes you strong." Her claws brushed against the glass of his pod. "You made me believe in something I didn't understand. You made me feel—" She turned her head away, wiping a tear before it could fall. Sarathi commanders weren't supposed to cry. But then again, she wasn't the same commander anymore. Then a faint sound broke the silence, a groan. Her heart stopped. She turned sharply at it and saw his fingers twitch. The monitors flickered as his vitals climbed. Slowly, painfully, Aaron opened his eyes. "Hey." His voice was rough, weak. "Did I win?" Lyra let out a shaky breath that turned into a laugh. "You stubborn fool," she said, half laughing, half crying. "You almost died." He tried to grin, but it came out more like a wince. "Almost doesn't count, right?" She shook her head and leaned closer. "You shouldn't have gone alone." He blinked at her slowly, his voice soft. "Didn't want anyone else to get hurt." "You got hurt," she said, her voice breaking. Aaron looked at her for a long time. Really looked. Her eyes, usually sharp and distant, now glistened with warmth and sorrow. "Hey," he whispered. You crying for me, Commander? Lyra froze, her face turning slightly away. No, she said softly. Sarathi don't cry. He smiled weakly. Must have been the air then. They both sat in silence for a while, the hum of the ship filling the space between them. Finally, she reached out and took his hand, her claws careful against his skin. When you walked away that day, she said quietly, I thought I had lost a soldier. I didn't realize I had lost something much more. Aaron's brows furrowed. What do you mean? She looked straight into his eyes. You weren't just another soldier, Aaron, you were my heart. For a long moment, he didn't speak. His eyes softened, and despite his pain, he smiled. That same calm, steady smile that had once infuriated her, and now melted her soul. Well, he whispered, I guess I'll have to stick around then. Can't let you lose it twice. Lyra laughed, a small, quiet laugh that carried all her relief, guilt, and love. You better, she said, because next time I'm not letting you walk away. He squeezed her hand gently. You never had to. I was always right here,